Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. Today, we've got Matthew Weems with us, and I am super excited to have him today with us because he is going to share his success story when it comes to AI integration. So, hi, Matt. Thank you for being here with us today. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Matthew Weems. I'm the Assistant School Director at the Cambridge School of Bucharest. My day job is teaching and learning in the secondary. So that's a job I've had here for 8 years. But over the last 2.5 to 3 years, I've been looking at how we can integrate generative AI and AI in general to support our teaching and learning. It helps that I line manage all of the heads of departments so I can speak directly to them and they can filter that back out to their team. So it does help being in that kind of middle point of teaching and learning. But yeah, so that's mainly been it, and trying to make this all manageable for our staff, and then also looking at ways that we can prepare our students for the world they're going to enter.
That's a huge ordeal because basically I'm listening to you and I'm like, wow, this person has worked nonstop since I guess like what for 2, 3 years now that this second digital wave has started, right? So I always start asking the same question. Do you have a background in tech?
Ish, because I did a long story short, I didn't do very well in college. So I did a gap year where I ended up working for a media company, found I really enjoyed editing and using cameras, then ended up teaching some young students how to use cameras and editing equipment, and then went on to do a media degree. I then decided I would like to become a teacher after running nightclubs for many years. So it's a bit of a transition. So yeah, so then I applied to be a teaching course, and I really wanted to teach, but being a media degree, I went into IT. Then I did a skills development year because of the fact I was from a media background, not an IT computer science. So they basically put me through a master's in computer science in 1 year. And then I went on to be a computer science teacher in London, where I have taught elements of AI for many years. It's been in the curriculum for many years. Wherever I've taught, we've always tried to include emerging technology, which is getting harder to keep up with. But yes, so I've kind of got a background in tech, but I'm interested or avid. I'm more of an avid kind of user experience of tech side. But even when I was doing the computer science stuff, the computer science master's course, I was more interested in the experience people had when using tech, like the user interface and how to make that side easy for people to interact with technology. So I think that's where some of my interest in generative AI comes from, because I know you were almost staring at a blank box on most of these platforms. But what can you do to make that interesting for the user or easy to use for a teacher? And if you're going to put something in front of students, what does the user experience need to feel like to them as well? With that school leader lens filtering all of that. So it's a bit of a balance there. So ish is my answer.
Well, that is a very huge ish because I mean, being able to be in the IT, being one of the IT teachers, that means that you actually had like already large knowledge of tech behind. But I do understand what you're saying, and for me, it's very similar when it comes to talking about the tech experience. Because in my particular case, I don't have a tech background. And I would like always to pinpoint this fact because I see it as a phenomenon for those schools and those school leaders, educators that feel that because they don't have the tech background, perhaps for them, maybe going up that mountain is going to be steeper. So I thank you for being so open about this part because I think that it actually serves as an inspiration for others out there that are going to start integrating AI in their ecosystems. Now, I would like to understand a little bit more about the challenges and the journey that you had when all this ordeal started exploring AI, more specifically generative AI, because initially you mentioned that emerging technologies has always been in the curriculum in the schools where you have studied, but that is not necessarily the reality for most of the schools out there. So, can you please give us a little bit your experience now that not only locally but also you have a lot broader global perspective related to what you're doing right now in terms of artificial intelligence. So, can you please give us a little bit of your insight related to this?
So I think for me, I first experienced like generative AI, like ChatGPT, officially through, I would say, when it came out in like November time, I created an account. I was on a wait list because Romania is always like a couple of weeks behind every launch that happens. I usually see cool stuff happening in the US and the UK, and then I'm like, okay, I must set my clock. In 2 weeks' time, it'll arrive here. So then I started to play around, did the usual stuff of like, plan me a recipe, plan me this. Then I sat down, I think at Christmas time, and then really said, like, okay, like, plan me a lesson. And I was like, oh, that's pretty similar to what I would have done there. And then I started to do a compare and contrast and came back in January and ran some training for our staff and started to experience what these kind of chatbots could do in terms of supporting our school leaders. And I think over time, a growing challenge has been myself being more educated over, as well as the tech, but also things like compliance, GDPR. And I think that for me, I've always been cautious because I've done a little bit about cybersecurity and a little bit about in the courses that I teach and the courses that I've personally taken. But I think over time, those two have intersected and sometimes slowed my pace down because I think, and we've tried to go through more school approved tools like Microsoft Copilot originally wasn't available to us in a secure way through our license. It is now. So it's not the greatest chatbot in the world, but when we don't need frontier tech, I don't think, to be planning a lesson or supporting you in lesson planning. I don't think every teacher needs the most recent version of every single thing because most of them do a pretty good job on the older versions. Even ChatGPT like 3 or 3.5 could do an okay job at planning a lesson. So we've tried since then to go through our tenancy of an enterprise tool. We did invest in some ChatGPT teams, which is the secure enterprise version, but obviously we can't afford that for every member of staff. So we did that for key IT, for marketing, for myself to experiment with. So we have about 6 licenses for that for staff to use. So one of the key areas became security around these tools, as well as using the ones that are readily available. And we've tried as much as we can to encourage our staff to use the safe and secure ones. And we are currently in the process of getting a Google Workspace as well. So we can access things like Gemini and 𝗪𝗵𝘁 through enterprise security school licenses, which schools can apply for free. It's a little bit tricky in the back end, but work with your IT team to get the domain and everything like that, and you can get that set up. But then we're in a tricky situation where you've got Copilot sitting over here at Microsoft and a load of Google tools sitting over here. We've managed to connect the email addresses, but for the Google side, we're going to switch off Gmail, Docs, all that kind of stuff. So it will just be an AI tool sitting in those Gmail to give them, again, some more access to secure tools, which are useful for them as teachers. But again, it's always a tech thing, trying to manage what people have, because you don't want Outlook and Gmail running in parallel. You don't want Word and Docs running in parallel. So we're trying to keep everything nice and streamlined, but always looking for ways that we can integrate it in a safe way.
That is, for me, one of the most successful aspects of how you and your school have been integrating artificial intelligence since it came out. Because safety, for me, it's also a huge dilemma. And I think that a lot of educators in a lot of schools are doing things like they want to go 3 or 5 steps ahead of them instead of working on the fundamentals first. So my question is about this. How did you handle staff training related to privacy and ethics specifically to ensure basically equity and inclusion from the start?
So we went through and gave them just some training on basic GDPR. Like, not every single member of staff needs to be an expert in that legislation. Schools have DPOs or equivalent data protection officers, or those kind of roles, kind of equivalent around the world. So we just went through the rules about not uploading student work, because Department for Education guidance in the UK says that's that student's IP. Those students are usually under the age of 18 or under the age of 16. And in Romania, anything in our area, anything under the age of 16 needs parental consent. So you don't have that consent for students to upload work, which is great because I don't want teachers to use it for grading and things like that. But also making sure we don't include people's names. And as I've become more educated in this, as well as taking out a name, taking out other identifying features as well, such as personal stories could identify that person. And like you have to tread very carefully about what you put in. So as much as you can, the information or context you're going to give an LLM when you're planning a lesson, it's stripping out all of that kind of personal detail. But you can say, I have a dyslexic student who needs a set of keywords. Like that isn't naming that person. But if you include that they're in this class and they're in, and other identifying features that tell more of a story about that student, it goes into tricky GDPR. So it is a thing that you have to tread very carefully on. And I suggest that you work with the DPO in your school, whoever has had that more advanced level training. For me personally, I've done my AI governance professional training, but I'm going to now start my 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝘁, which is basically the DPO GDPR training for Europe, because I still think that I need to upskill myself a little bit more on this area. And I'm not saying that everyone should go off and do courses meant for privacy professionals, but I'm saying you probably will have access to a school lawyer or a DPO or someone who is a privacy professional who can advise you on what you can do. And I would say if you can, use a safe, secure tool that your school provides, because if you do make a mistake, at least that isn't going to train an AI model, which can cause other more kind of legal and legislative headaches for a school. And in the EU, potentially fines of 7 to 15 million euros if you're not handling things correctly with the new legislation that's due to kick in. Almost all of it will come into place next August. So that is filtering our kind of level of protection that we are giving. And yeah, so it's context without personal information, if that makes sense.
It makes absolute sense, especially because from one of the takeaways that I'm getting from you is get your staff trained, teach them the fundamentals, not only when it comes on the technological part, because that's where everybody's focusing on, and also really take care of the governance aspect of artificial intelligence and how we are shaping our new digital citizens, to call it in a way. So,
And part of our, sorry, if I could just add, part of our
yes, of
training,
course.
we cover things like bias, hallucinations or misinformation, or however you want to label that. But one of the key things is our training includes that whatever you put in front of students, that's human ownership. You can't go like, well, ChatGPT output that and the maths was wrong or the information was wrong. You as a human, as you would if you went onto a website and copy and pasted that into a document, or if you bought something off a platform and it had incorrect information, you as the human, by putting that in front of students, you are taking the ownership. You can't blame the AI. You are making that professional judgment. So it is we do train our staff up about those things they need to be aware of before they put it in front of a student, to say ultimately it's their responsibility.
But now, of course, every time that I talk about AI integrations in our trainings, for us it's really important to maintain the image of the triangle, because we're talking about the staff, we're talking about the students, but also we're talking about the parents. So, how is it that you and your school in their successful journey in integrating artificial intelligence managed to juggle these three aspects and merge them all together?
We've been upfront about it, and I think you can't hide this from parents. We've issued a letter to them very early on saying we are using AI and this is how we're using it. This is how we're not using it. And I think one aspect that often gets missed is what happens if you have a concern about a teacher or the school's way we're using AI. Who do you speak to? So we made sure, and again, we've just followed our regular communication pathways. They would go to their head of year, their main pastoral point person first, the same as they would do if they had any other complaints or issues.
But this okay. That is perfect. We're in a school right now,
We
so
are in the
okay.
school.
Yeah,
Just to
exactly.
prove I'm not in a school, this isn't a background I've put on. Yeah, but then who do they speak to? So we follow those regular channels, and obviously they would then speak to the next person. Same if he had an academic concern, the head of year would be the filter. They would go to the head of department. If it was a maths concern, they would come to me now as someone who's leading on AI in the school, and I would speak with them and we'd respond. But we've been open letters communicating which tools we use, as well as sending out those letters. It's in the parent handbook. AI wasn't originally in our data privacy information. So we're updating that with our DPO to also have it very transparent on our website what we're using there. But we've already been transparent through as many different internal communication methods as possible. And for example, we were open and got consent to use the chatbots we're using with our Key Stage 3 students. And even then, as a parent, then like, oh, my child says he's using AI. And I'm like, well, we've already communicated with you that they're using this chatbot that's safe and secure, that has safeguards and meets all the requirements that a school needs to bear in mind. But they'd forgotten they'd given that consent and thought I was telling the student to go off and use ChatGPT at home. So again, it's just a constant communication. And we run webinars throughout the year as well. I'm endlessly writing letters, which I've written two. One about this year, about the smart glasses and wearable tech. And again, that for us it's probably might be the future of the way this tech is going to go. But right now, for us as a school, we don't have the capacity to handle smart glasses and wearables in terms of all the GDPR. So that for us has had to be a ban. We don't usually ban technology, but for us, that's an immediate stop because we don't have the capacity to manage that right now. We're already struggling with generative AI. And then the other letter I wrote today was about 𝗬𝗲 and deepfakes and making parents aware now your child potentially has a deepfake generating machine in their pocket. So that has been another bit of information. And we also have access to multiple different platforms. I'm not going to name drop, but CPD platforms that have training for staff. They also have training for parents on there as well. So reminding them there's places they can go for resources. And we are here as an open book and resource for the entire community, not just our students, them as well if they have questions or concerns.
One of the things that I consider that is so smart about you and your school is that you are embracing smartly and cautiously everything related to this new technology, especially because when I advocate for artificial intelligence and more specifically generative AI, I say that I am a cautious positivist, if that is a thing, because I am the kind of person that believe that if you don't understand something, you actually have to get down there and, put your elbows on the table and start learning about it, or at least listening with an open mind. So most of the things that as a school have to deal with in terms of parents and what the parents are dealing with are the ethical dilemmas. Because of course we have this most valuable thing, which is our kids. And we want them to do well. We want them to be AI future ready, but then we want them to be good humans. We want them to be good people. So it's sort of like they are digital citizens. It's like a very weird mix out there, right? So how is it that you are handling these dilemmas with the parents, and how is it that you're pushing back?
So again, it's that open communication and as many through lines as we can do. And in our school, I would mainly say that when you hear people like myself or other speakers talking about AI in the classroom, 90% of that is the teacher has worked with the tool in the background and then they produced a resource that goes into the classroom. It's only a very small number of situations where they're using chatbots. And that's with me, who's deeply into this and does it very safely. But I think we have a duty to bring some in very safely to teach them good habits. Because if you only rely on TikTok to teach them what to do, they will pick up some dangerous habits of how to use it to, the classic cheating. But if I can show them through the units that we're doing how you can use it to support you, and I was talking to somebody the other day, my approach and their approach has always been working with the AI should respond in something happening in the real world. It shouldn't just be screen back and forth. It should be, I've gone and asked for help or a bit of a support, and then I've gone and done something in another platform like code or done some designing, and then I've gone back and asked for more support. Like I want real world action. I don't want 100% glued to screens working through pathways. That's not my vision on how this should work. And I think it's tricky because in an ideal world, and if you listen to people online, in an ideal world, every teacher should be teaching AI literacy. It should be in history, geography. That, in my mind, being a realist and someone working in a school, that would be a 2 to 3 year upskilling of just my teachers and reworking our curriculum, which we've crafted over many years, and also retraining of teachers that we have, retraining as an international school, the incoming teachers that we have, usually on that 2 year cycle when contracts renew, getting everyone. It's an impossible thing to do. We are doing as much as we can, but I think that we are doing what we can in computer science, what we can in 𝗵𝗫he, what we can in assemblies, because I think it's easier, or we should be doing something at least. So we've done assemblies on deepfakes. We've done assemblies and webinars for parents about these things. Like, for example, we're building 2 new buildings and have to remake our timetable. Like, that is commitment and time. We can't just ditch that. Go forget the buildings. We're going to do AI instead. So we have to figure out a way that we can use our time, and also to be aware that we have that rotation of staff being in international school. So what level do all our staff need to have to use the tools safely, to have conversations with students at a certain level, and how do we train them on that? But I think anything deeper, we try to do what we can right now. I've rewrote the computer science curriculum to have a very much a larger focus on AI, and even things like the EU AI Act are built into the curriculum for students to explore and unpack, because they might be creating AI systems themselves one day. So it's good for them to know the law and what they can and can't do. And also assemblies. We did assemblies on deepfakes last year with the students. We might need to do another one now with 𝗬𝗵𝗁 coming out. So it's useful to have someone at your school who kind of horizon scan a little bit, who unfortunately, even for me, sometimes I have to flip LinkedIn off because it becomes too much coming at you. But someone who can dip their toe in the water occasionally and be aware of what ethical dilemmas could be brewing. And I think students now having a deepfake app and an app generator in their pockets is potentially a melting pot of ethical dilemmas that might come our way. It was a bit specialist before. They had to go to a certain website, might have had to create an account, might have had to download something. Now it's pre-packaged and encouraging you to put your face in it. So it's not going to be a big leap for them to put their own face to someone else's face. So that's my concern. And we're already sending out letters to parents about that. And we'll probably need to pick that up in 𝗵𝗫he assemblies, wherever we possibly can. But this year, keeping children safe in education. So if you're a British school, you'll be following that legislation. It mentioned the DfE's product safety expectations and their guidelines about generative AI. So there's that link. So you need to be thinking about that as a school. But it does mention mis and disinformation. So things like deepfakes fall under that. So we have looked at ways across our curriculum. We can look at mis and disinformation on social media. And of course, a lot of that naturally links to AI because it is now being generated that way. So it's about giving your teachers enough to be able to have the conversations to support what they're doing in the curriculum. And also for staff that might be using particular tools, enough knowledge about that tool. And I think quite often gets missed with AI literacy. The legal definition in the EU AI Act is knowing about the risks and harms. So I think it's not just knowing how to prompt, it's knowing what can go wrong if you get an incorrect output, or if you put something that is incorrect in front of students, or you put students onto an AI system which is not secure and meant for students. And we've seen in the news things like character AI and ChatGPT being linked to suicide, and how we can have those conversations with students and, as much as we can, show them how to use these tools productively and show them good use cases rather than what they're learning on TikTok, which I think a recent OECD study said about 55 to 60% of them are learning about AI from TikTok and social media.
Well, that is mainly one of the principal resources that they've got. Remember that one of the biggest flops, I think, that our generation, because we are the parents of this younger generation, the ones that are like 15, 16-year-olds down, one of the biggest flops is that we're just letting them, be online without having much of the restrictions. But now with AI, we're sort of like relearning the rules. Now, one of the things that I would like to focus on is what have changed in terms of mindset for your teachers and staff in general since your schools have been integrating artificial intelligence.
The mindset shift is we're not doing what you might see online and certain companies going like, we're AI first, everything has to go through AI. It's about people finding their comfort zone. And when we've done our training for staff, those workshops have always been hosted in an IT lab with either myself or members of our AI committees from the primary and secondary. We tried to get staff from each, because we're all through school. So someone from the primary, someone from the secondary, even Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, and trying to work through in a safe environment, something that's meaningful for them that would help them. And also going through, okay, here's a red line. I think you're coming up to the point where you are stripping something away, where you're putting something in between you and the student. So like, for example, with report writing, where is the balance between it doing all of the work or you doing something which we've done with staff, which is to talk about how you can speak into something like a Word document with dictate mode and then use AI to tidy up those comments, knowing that they're anonymized and they don't really reference the student. That would me as a productive use case, instead of just getting I need a comment for a year 7 student who does computer science. It will just give me the most middle of the road response. But if I've given it lots of context about what I'm doing, and we've tried to encourage staff to find workflows that work for them, that would add to the experience, not strip things away.
So how are you measuring impact? I mean, what are the indicators that matters most for you in your school now? Because for me, this entire experience that you have been, talking from the very beginning are just multiple examples of the bigger picture. So how is it that you guys are measuring impact?
So we have I'll be completely honest, we do need to run a survey with staff. Now, I think we've got a larger committee up this year. So running something about workload and if it saved time, but I'm a bit cautious about hours saved. I think it's a bit of a misleading metric at times. I think that I've got to decide on what we want to measure a little bit more. So again, internally for staff, we're still working on that, but I know anecdotally, and again, it's not solid numbers, from speaking to members of our committee, that staff are finding it useful for things like writing an email and helping tidy up their comments and help to tidy up their work they're doing and work and not cut corners, but save a bit of time here or there. I haven't gone around and done the survey and gone, how many hours have you saved? For students, we've just finished a project with them in computer science where they've co-planned something with AI. And the results are that I think 76% of them found the chatbot really helpful. 85% found it more enjoyable. And then I think we've got another statistic where around 70% of them said that they felt they were more independent as well. So I've got a recent solid metric of student use. I haven't quite decided for staff because, as I've said, I don't think time saved is really what I want to measure. But again, what do you measure? Has it made them more creative? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out myself, but I have anecdotal evidence on the teacher side, but something a bit more solid, as I said, from students.
Well, if I were you, what my main focus would be, how is it that they feel that they learn in their own capacities? That would be part of the things that I would measure, like in their own capacities, like what were like the abilities that they have gained, the new knowledge that they have gained with artificial intelligence now in comparison to what they did in the past without it. That would be something that for me is like super interesting.
Well, we are halfway through our first term. So usually at the end of each term, we do a survey about initiatives. So AI will be on that survey, wherever form or wherever we decide to measure.
Before we go, I would like to ask, looking back, what's one thing you'd do differently?
Ooh, way back when, I think I would have been a bit more cautious about driving our staff to something like ChatGPT, because back in the day, it was training automatically. There wasn't that toggle switch to switch it off. But we also didn't have access to Microsoft Copilot. There wasn't really access to anything secure back when it first came out. So if I could do a few things differently, I would have probably done a little bit more training about GDPR and data earlier on. Even though we did mention that to staff, I think it wasn't probably as explicit as it should be. But I think because, like you said in yourself, I'm usually quite a cautious person anyway, that I've always done this in a phased and steady way. So not too many red lines that I think, even amber lines I think we've crossed. I just think that myself, knowing what I know now about GDPR, I think back in the day, I probably wouldn't have encouraged as many staff to use a free open tool.
All right. I think that is actually one of the most valuable things that we can say right now. Well, Matt, would you like to leave us with a pearl of wisdom?
Oh, that's a bit no pressure. I would say you've got to work as a community and you've got to find out what the value is to your school. And it can't just be an individual teacher who's passionate about AI in your school. It has to be something that is being dealt with at a leadership level and has to at least be acknowledged at a leadership level. I am very fortunate when I speak to people that I was a school leader who was interested in AI. So I managed to convince sometimes that other members of school leadership that were like, oh, this is a passing fad, it's going to go away. I could go, this is going to be in Microsoft Windows in a couple of months. There's going to be this deep fake thing in a couple of months. And eventually, when I started to be proven right that these things were existing and it wasn't going to go away, and student use increased by the statistics globally, that helped. So I would say it has to be something which you've got teachers driving it and leaders driving on the ground, but it's got to be something that is acknowledged at the highest level of your school, even that up to ownership, that this is something which is going to impact our students' lives, even if it's capped and it doesn't ruin the job market, something that is around and we need to be aware of and at least acknowledge that it is going to impact our students.
Matthew, thank you so much for being with us today. Everything that you have said, I think that for those that are going to watch this video and going to listen to the podcast later on, it's going to be immensely helpful. And probably if they are starting their journey, it's going to help them at least to use your experience as a very, very important guideline. Thank you so much for being with us today. And for those that are watching this, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.